You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. And welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, joined by my sister, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor, Tara. Today, we're absolutely thrilled to welcome Jeff Patterson, the creator of the Yielding Warrior Method, a transformational approach grounded in the ancient wisdom of Tai Chi and Qigong. Jeff brings over 36 years of experience in guiding individuals to optimize their performance, strengthen their mental resilience, and find clarity through consistent practice. His teachings emphasize being rooted in the present, enhancing sensitivity and awareness, and committing to lifelong learning. Through his books, online programs, and community of yielding warriors, Jeff has helped countless students achieve a calm sense of groundedness, redefine their focus, and thrive in both their personal and professional lives. We cannot wait to explore how his holistic approaches can empower us to live with harmony, health, and success. All tenets of your one self and journey to your best self. Jeff, welcome aboard.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit pre-recording about how, Tara and I had really kind of circled you to be a guest on here. And it just fits, something that we're trying to create at your one self, and how you can incorporate the meditative arts, as you put it, I believe, into, more masculine, spaces such as mixed martial arts and fighting. I don't know how you categorize the things that you're doing out there in Oregon, but can you talk right off the bat? Big question for me. How do you square that? So how do you square that circle? It seems from the outside looking in, practicing meditation and yielding, as you say, it's kind of diametrically opposed to being aggressive and using that carnal kind of lizard brain. The adrenaline's flowing, the hormones are kicking, the testosterone that I need in the rink or when I'm working out. So how do you kind of balance those out into the yielding warrior? Can you kind of give us an overview?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get a little bit off track when they hear the term yielding and they think that I'm giving up. Yielding is not at all giving up. Yielding is very strategic, and it's the idea of learning how to find the shortest path to where you want to go without reaching a lot of resistance. So we're looking to lead people down a direction or a path without having to butt heads with them. And we can talk a little bit more about the specifics of yielding. But with that said, I was turned on to the meditative arts through probably one of the most aggressive things I've ever done in my life, and that is Western boxing. When I was a youth, I was very much into boxing. I used to go to a boxing gym just a few blocks down the street here from my academy. And at a boxing gym, they're a lot different than your traditional style fitness classes in that it's not one coach running a group of people. Usually there's 4 or 5 coaches in the gym, and they all have maybe 3 or 4 fighters that they're working with. Well, at this one particular gym, one of the coaches that was there had a great reputation. He had created very high level boxers in both amateur and professional levels. And I really wanted to get to spend some time with him, but he had a full schedule. He had already had a stable of fighters he was working with and didn't really have time to take on anybody else. So I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there. I'd work really hard. I'd show him that I'd be worth his time if he invested some time into me. And I followed him around for about 3 or 4 months. And finally, he started giving me some tips and showing me a few things. And, he said something to me after about 2 or 3 weeks of getting to work with him that changed my life forever. In that he told me if I really wanted to be a good boxer, I should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time, I'm this 19-year-old kid thinking, isn't Tai Chi for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? I didn't understand it at all, but I had a lot of respect for him, and I started down that path. And not only has it changed my life in many ways, through the years, I've been very fortunate. I've had over 26,000 students come through my academy here in Portland. And I've literally heard hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's kind of what gives me the inspiration and the energy to get out there and write my last couple books and create my online program. And, really is the fuel, I guess, to keep me going. But in doing that, I've been able to see that it's not just meditation isn't just for this spiritual, kind of mind body connection thing. There's so many different directions that you can take a meditation practice in ways that we can benefit by doing that. And I have it kind of broken down into 5 paths that are traditionally followed with incorporating meditation into your life. And the first one is kind of the active or athletic side of the practice. And you'll notice that a lot of professional athletes these days are turning to the meditative arts to help improve their performance. This helps with our timing, our awareness, our mind-body connection, all of these things that help improve our physical performance. Then there's the therapeutic side of the practice, which helps with our flexibility, our health and longevity, all of these things. There's the medical side of the practice, the philosophical side of the practice, and also the meditative or spiritual side of the practice. And so, as somebody turns to these practices, you could follow any one of those paths and literally study it for the rest of your life and, still be down the journey. I've been studying now for 36 years. I'm still just as much a student as I've ever been, and nowhere near the master, and so it's really a deep path to follow, and there's lots of benefits to be had.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. Thanks for being on here. Thanks for the work that you do. It's such a pleasure. Uh, let's even just go back to the basics because I do think, with words, there's a lot of semantics and logistics that people can get hung up on. So let's go back to meditation. And, our listeners, they know that it's not just, sitting in full lotus. Hopefully by now they do, but for those that are still exploring meditation, mindfulness, can you talk about what meditation even means to you? What did it mean when you were 19 or you were younger and someone said, your potential teacher said, go start meditating? And also, can you explain how there's the moving meditation, that it is more a state of mind? And I know that's a loaded question, but yeah, so back to the basics of meditation. So thank you for delineating all of the different categories. Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, I think I can take a swing at that. So, with meditation, it's broken down into movement practices that could be things like Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga, different things that involve that uh, idea of learning how to be more in tune with the movement of the body. It's kind of like if I go to grab a glass of water, it's not just my arm extending out to pick up the glass. I'm softly shifting the weight. I'm turning my torso. My obliques are activating to give my arms strength and turn out. I mean, there's hundreds of things that are going on in the body to do this simple movement. And by incorporating these movement meditative practices, we start to expand our awareness and see these things more clearly. And that's how it's so beneficial in so many different directions, especially with athletes, because it helps them break things down and be a little bit more in tune with that movement. And then we have still practices like a sitting meditation or a standing meditation. And these have different purposes as well because we can integrate different energetic circulations in the body, different breathing strategies. There's more of the philosophical side of the training that works with strategy and stimulating the mind to be more open and think different directions. And so when I talk about building a life practice around the meditative arts for somebody new coming to the practice, I like them to understand that there's kind of three basic pillars of practice. There's what I call ritual practices, where you want to set a little bit of time aside every day. It could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour, whatever that is for you. And that ritual practice could be a sitting practice, it could be a movement practice. It's something that kind of resonates for you. And I usually tell people to find something that you're going to have fun doing, because we want to be consistent with this and do this on a regular basis. And then we have the second pillar, which is active practices. And these are things that you can do when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. They could be as simple as counting out 10 breaths or doing some spinal rotations or a simple movement practice. Because with meditation, while most people experience a peaceful moment when they're doing meditation, it doesn't really make any sense to meditate for 20 minutes and feel peaceful and good, and then the whole rest of your day be stressed out. And so we want to integrate these practices to make it more of a way of life. And then the third pillar is the philosophical practices, and we can integrate these practices into the active training practices that we do, as well as the ritual-based practices. And I think having that basic understanding and how to integrate these different things into whatever it is you're trying to do can be really helpful.
That's
Yeah,
excellent.
that's wonderful. Thank you.
I really do like how you try to incorporate it outside of just that time, but make it a lifestyle. You're really going all in. You mentioned the ritual practice. Can you talk about how that could really work for an athlete? Because consistency and ritual is so inborn with a lot of athletes, and to really get to a high level and into their peak performance, they have to be consistent. So can you talk about just being consistent and how it's important to both sides, both the athlete and someone who's trying to get more into this meditative space?
Yeah, so first, with the talking about athletes, you know, these days it's nice to see so many people open to the idea of meditation and seeing the benefits. And at this point, there's been many scientific studies that prove that meditation is good for many different things. But you'll see people at the highest level in sport. When Phil Jackson was coaching the Chicago Bulls and the LA Lakers, he used to have them practicing meditation and Tai Chi because it improved their performance on the court. And so here you have
The
the
Zen
best
master,
athletes in the world. What's
right?
that?
The Zen master was
Oh,
a nickname of his.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard him referred to that before. Yes. So here, you have the best athletes in the world that are practicing meditation, and just to maybe even get 1 or 2% better on the court, and so it definitely has an effect and can help you kind of reach those higher levels of performance. Now, when you're talking about the consistency or the average person thinking about getting into a meditation practice, as a teacher, I've been teaching for over 30 years. And one of the hardest things that I struggle with as a teacher is trying to get people to see the benefits of the practice and do it consistently enough to where they change their mindset from thinking about, this is something I have to do every day, to this is something I get to do because I see so many benefits from the practice. And so I've found that there's three questions that I usually ask new people. And by doing this, I see the percentages and the success rates go up quite a bit. And the first question is, having a new student or somebody who's thinking about really incorporating meditation into a lifestyle, to think about, why do you want to take on to this practice? Do you want to stay healthier into your later years to watch your grandkids grow up? Or maybe you're dealing with a stress disorder, or depression or anxiety or panic attacks, or maybe you have an illness that you're trying to overcome, or maybe you're an athlete and you're trying to improve your performance. And then when you come up with a good, strong why, think about all of the things that will make your life better if you accomplish that. So it's not just a surface level why, it goes a little deeper than that. And then also think about the negative side. What are all the bad things that will happen if I don't get to this level of realization? Because the simple exercise of doing this helps us to get some kind of a fuel and motivation to maintain that consistency, which is the second realization that I want people to understand, in that the meditative arts is meant to be something that we do a little bit of every day. The Dalai Lama once said everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And, so many times through the years, I've heard people say, oh, I tried meditation, it didn't work for me, or I'll do it when I get stressed out and it makes me feel a little better. And that's kind of like saying, today I'm hungry, I want an apple, I'm going to go plant a seed this morning. You can't do that. You have to cultivate it, and you have to build that foundation and that awareness. And through time, it gains momentum and you get to deeper and deeper levels of realization. So through that consistency, we develop a discipline and integrity and a perseverance that not only affects our basic practice, but it also bleeds over into everything else we do in life. And then the third thing that I like people to think about and consider is that you have to find a guide. If you don't have somebody helping you, pointing you in the right direction, you could literally spend 15, 20 years of your life kind of going in circles and really never get to any kind of depth in the practice. And I've seen it firsthand here at the Academy, where we'll have self-taught people sometimes come into the Academy that have been training for 15 years. And they'll see somebody here at the program that's only been here for 12 months that's a lot further along in their practice, and sometimes they'll get a little bit discouraged. And life is short, your time is valuable. Finding somebody to help point you down the right path can save you a lot of time and get you to that point where you're seeing the success and developing a passion for the practice a lot sooner, which is where you're going to reap all the benefits. So I think by just taking a little bit of time and considering those three different variables there can really make a big difference in the overall success of starting a practice.
Yeah, that's Brian's probably like, oh, Tara says this all the time. So I'm so glad. Thank you for it's very helpful to all of the listeners, but it's really helpful to me too, so that I can tell Brian these things that I tell him all the time, and he rolls his eyes. So before we go back to dive into some of that stuff that is just gold and so true and so important, why do you think some people do it alone for so long? Because there is this like, and there's maybe there's a little pride there. It's like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. And it's like, yes, you have, and that's and that's great, but it hasn't actually improved your practice or hasn't really gotten you somewhere. Is that a generational thing? Is that a fear for asking help? Is it not trusting other people, not finding the right guide or teacher or group or tribe?
I don't know all the reasons. I do know that part of it comes from just a lack of understanding the depth of the practice, and only having a guide and somebody that's been doing it for a number of years can help point you in the right direction. I it's kind of like, I always tell people to think about, imagine if you have never witnessed the game of basketball before, and I take you to a basketball court and I give you a ball and I say, go play basketball. You're not going to know that the ball's supposed to go on the hoop. You don't know you're supposed to dribble. You don't know anything. You're going to be horrible. But if I give you a world-class coach and I say, go work with this person for 6 months, you could get pretty good in 6 months. And meditation is no different. It's a very deep practice. Having somebody help kind of navigate the waters with you, you can really accomplish a lot in a short amount of time. And when you say, you'll have these people that do it on their own, it always makes me think of this one gentleman that came to me about 20 years ago, who I was so impressed with him because When I first met him, he said that he was doing a 2.5 hour ritual every day. And for anybody to do a half an hour ritual a day takes amount of discipline. But this guy was very disciplined. He had been doing a 2.5 hour ritual every day for about 10 years. And as I probed a little more and trying to find out, where he'd been training and what he'd been doing, he told me that he had learned from watching David Carradine videos on DVD. And immediately I was a little bit skeptical, but I was like, man, he's doing 2.5 hours a day. Maybe he's doing pretty good, and so he started coming to classes, and we kind of saw the level that he was at. And he's one of those people who got extremely frustrated because he was seeing students that had been around for 6 months that were way further along in their practice. And if you could just imagine, here's somebody with extreme discipline and a certain amount of drive that most people will never see. If he would have had a guide during that 10 years, think of all of what he could have accomplished, And so that's what I really want people to understand is that motivation and that effort is very respectable, but you can do a lot more if you have somebody kind of helping you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it is a combination, for sure, that's gonna help people. And then back to the why, which is so huge, and I resonated so much. I joke with people, like, when they talk about the consistency, I say, well, how long am I going to have to do this for, whether it's a meditation or hypnosis? And I always say, like, well, it depends how clean you want your teeth to be. So it's like brushing your teeth, right? You're going to continually want to bathe, and that's how I feel about, consistency with mindfulness and meditation. What if they can't find their why, that they know that they're there, and or maybe it's all of them. It's like, well, I want health, I want happiness, I want joy, I want, eternal life, whatever it might be. Are there any tips that you can give our listeners if they're just like, I'm not sure, I know something has to change, I know I want something, but there's nothing like super pressing?
Well, I think everybody, if they think about it, can find something that's important to them and find a reason or how this will benefit them. Even if it's, you know, being more healthy into your later years. I mean, there's been so many proven case studies on how practicing Tai Chi and Qigong and the meditative arts helps us stay more aware as we age and keep our mind sharper and keep our body healthier so we have more energy as we're moving along. If they do anything in an athletic field, it's great for your performance. If you're dealing with any kind of mental conflicts, it's good to learn how to improve that focus. And there really is so many different paths that you could do the practice for. I think if somebody really sits down and kind of contemplates a little bit, they could find a why. And maybe their why today might change and be a little different tomorrow, but they could at least find something that would help point them and get them started in that direction.
Yeah, that's so true. I do think that the why can change and evolve as the practice does, right?
Was there a moment that you got validation, when you found your Angelo Dundee, or, when you were in that first, boxing gym, and he had, the trainer had recommended, you got to pursue, this kind of alternative track. It's not just about how many jump ropes, you can do, how many times you can hit the heavy bag, how fast you're going to hit that speed bag. When he kind of opened you up as a 19-year-old, I'm sure you weren't just like, yes, this is amazing, and you just the next day got right into it. Maybe you were. If that's not the case, and it took you some time, was there something that happened? Did it take your kind of prowess in the ring, or on the mat, to the next level? Was there, something you were able to do that you hadn't been able to do in the months leading up to it? Would have clicked and said, oh man, this guy's legit.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, when I first started, I wasn't interested in doing meditation. I was 19. I just wanted to be a better fighter. And, so when he told me that and he started me on that path, I was a little skeptical right from the start. I was never 100% in. It took a while. And, anything he gave me back then, I treated like it was gold. When he'd tell me something in the gym, like how to keep my elbow down when I'm turning my shoulders or whatever it was, I'd drill it over and over and over again until I perfected it. Well, when he told me that I should be doing a half an hour of Tai Chi and a half an hour of sitting meditation every day, I was like, well, I'm going to do a little more. So I was doing an hour of Tai Chi and a half an hour of sitting every day. And in the first couple weeks, he showed me the first few movements of a Tai Chi form. And then he never showed me anything else for about 5 or 6 months. It was a while. And at about the 3 or 4 month mark, I started getting a little discouraged and thinking, man, is this guy ever going to show me anything? Why am I doing this? I'd go down every day in my basement, and I would never miss. If I told him I was going to do it every day, I did it every day like I'm brushing my teeth. It was consistent. The last thing I wanted to do was to go to the boxing gym and to have him ask me if I did my practice today and have to tell him no. So I was doing it every day. And I'm sure he saw my discouragement. And then one day, maybe around the 6 or 7 month mark, I go down in my basement to do the practice and started going into the Tai Chi form. And I looked up at the clock, and an hour and a half had gone by, and it felt like 15 minutes. And at that point, I didn't know what to think just happened. I don't know where the time went, but I know it was euphoric and it felt amazing. And I couldn't believe that I had this kind of experience. And from that point forward, my whole mindset shifted. And rather than looking at it like, hey, this is a chore I got to do because I told my coach I'd do it, I started looking forward to it. Not only was I doing my hour and a half in the morning, if I had a little time in the afternoon, I'd do a little more, and I'd try to work it in. And I'm sure he saw this shift in my energetic state when I'd come into the gym. And it was only a few weeks after that where he showed me the rest of the form in a couple weeks. And so he was waiting for me to make that realization, and he knew it. He just wasn't kind of telling me that that's what he was looking for. And so it wasn't easy. It wasn't something that just came to me by any means. But it definitely affected my performance. And he told me that as well. He said, you'll notice that all the guys that you're training with now, if you do this in a year from now, they're not going to be able to hang with you. And when I started doing that practice, I noticed that I started passing them up. And that was something that was very motivating to me because I was very competitive back in those days and still maybe am a little bit. And I would always kind of look for those results and seeing how that was coming out. But the thing that happened is because that was such an amazing feeling and I wanted more of that, my priorities started shifting. And I started kind of, rather than boxing being my main thing, the meditative arts kind of took that first seat. And I started really kind of following that path. And, I've spent the last 30 plus years of my life, just studying the meditative arts and training with as many teachers as I can around the world and really trying to just explore that way of life.
That's awesome. I love to advocate when I can for kind of the uninitiated, and those maybe not steeped in kind of the knowledge of the meditative arts or ancient kind of Eastern philosophy may not be as familiar with Tai Chi. They might still think, like you said, it's just elderly people in the park waving at mime to ghosts or something. I'm not sure what they're doing right when you drive by. Can you give a little primer? Maybe touch on a little bit the historical importance of Tai Chi, pronunciation alert, the breathing, Qigong that goes along with it, how it's maybe related to yoga. Is it more of a martial art? Just give us a little bit of background there for those who maybe not familiar.
Yeah. So Tai Chi was originally created as a martial art. And what happened was there's um, an ancient spiritual teacher that came over from India called Buddha Dhammo, and he came to the temple and realized that a lot of these monks that were practicing Tai Chi and doing these practices were broken in their body. They were unhealthy. They weren't, Their longevity in the arts wasn't very long. And so he taught them how to integrate some of these Qigong practices, which is breath work and energetic work, to help make them healthier. And nowadays, if you were to say pool all the Tai Chi groups or academies around the country, I bet it's less than 5% of them that even have a high school education in the martial side of Tai Chi, because most people just practice it for the health benefits. And so these days it's very common to follow that path for that. Now, when you start talking about Qigong or yoga or Tai Chi and understanding why this one or why that one, I like to look at it rather than following any one of those paths, is to more to understand the underlying principles of any meditation practice. And I call these the five regulations, and they're basic fundamental development areas that we need to cultivate in any meditation practice we do. And the five regulations are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And briefly, I'll kind of touch on what those are. So, regulating the body, the easiest one to cultivate and integrate into our day, it's the idea of understanding our skeletal alignment and our muscular structure and how to release tension in the body. And an example would be, think about maybe a time when you're sitting down at your computer and you've been there 3 or 4 hours, and your shoulders are rounded forward and you're feeling very depleted, maybe lethargic, and your energetic state is just very weak. And then think about another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel like you're on top of the world. Well, these two different energetic states we're in 100% control of all the time. And so understanding how to regulate these things in our day-to-day activities is extremely powerful. And a little bit of a deeper level in that body regulation would be maintaining some kind of muscular structure in the body, maintaining flexibility, eating a healthy diet, making sure you're getting enough sleep. These are all things that are part of that body regulation. Then we have regulating the breath. And regulating the breath is a very deep topic. And in fact, Qigong is often referred to as the science of the breath, because there's hundreds of different breathing strategies and they help us regulate our energetic states physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so because of this, we kind of broadly categorize these different breathing styles as yin methods and yang methods. Yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style meditations that help bring that energy inward. And an example of a yin breath would be, if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing our conscious mind into our subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so if we want to emulate this style of breath work or energy in our meditations, we can do longer inhales, soft retentions at the end of the inhale, shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward, which is great for dealing with stress, anxiety, panic attacks, improving our focus. There's many reasons why we would do this yin side of the practice. Then we have the yang side of the breath, which is more aggressive. It's kind of like if you've ever had to push your car, you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is to use that exhale, put tension in the breath, make it audible. This helps us generate energy and power. Now, when we start understanding how to use the breath as a strategy, we can guide our physical, mental, and emotional states. We all go through the day with emotional ups and downs. Some people are like a roller coaster, others may be a little more balanced. But when you start to recognize these imbalances and understand how to use the breath, when you get excited, we can use the yin side of the breath to help bring it back down. And when you see yourself starting to feel depleted, we can use the yang side of the breath to help bring it back up. And so this understanding helps us find more balance throughout the day in our energetic states. Then the third pillar is regulating the mind. And this is a very deep topic and something that you'll study for the rest of your life if you get into the meditative arts. And, one of the most common things I've heard people say through the years is that, I've tried meditation, but it just didn't work for me. I couldn't quiet my mind. Somewhere along the way, people got this misguided idea that in order to be good at meditation, you have to be able to reach this state of nirvana and have nothing bother you. And, it couldn't be further from the truth. I've been very fortunate to train with some of the most amazing meditation teachers around the planet. And I've never met anybody who doesn't get distracted. We all do. It's part of humanity. There's no running away from that. And so when we can understand that and realize that we're not failing just because we're getting distracted by our thoughts, now we can change our mindset and get excited when we recognize these imbalances and use our practice to help bring us back to center. So say you're sitting or doing a movement practice for 20 minutes. If you get distracted 50 times during that session, and every time you get distracted, you use your posture, your breath, your movement, whatever it is to help come back to center and find that focus, you just got 50 repetitions of how to be off track and to get back to center. And now you do that every day, every month, every year, and you start to develop this power and this ability almost as if you're unshakable, where no matter what happens, you can bring yourself back to that focused state of being and respond a lot more appropriately. There's this story that I really enjoy about these two older monks, and they're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm. They come up to this big mud puddle, and there's this beautiful little girl standing on the other side of the puddle in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older monk, he yells across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" She looks back and says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs, he walks across the puddle and picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side, sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious. He says, we're not supposed to touch girls, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we finally realize we should probably stop worrying about that? We should probably let that thing go. And so regulating the mind is very powerful and very helpful. And the idea is, though, and we've all experienced this, if you take a problem and you stew on it for 3 weeks, it's really hard to let it go. But if you acknowledge that problem and you deal with it and you let it go right away and you focus on a positive direction, it's a lot easier to steer yourself back to that centered state of being. And so learning how to use some of these tools to develop that mental strength and that power to stay in that focused position is extremely powerful. Then we have the fourth pillar, or regulation, which is regulating the energy. Regulating the energy is an extremely deep topic and something that we could literally talk about for hours. However, the basic idea of it is, if you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, regulating the breath, and regulating the mind, you now have the tools to lead the energy in the body inward or extend it outward or circulate it in the body to get different outcomes that we will use with various different forms of meditation. And then lastly, we have regulating the spirit, which is a very profound idea, and it's something that meditation practitioners will spend their entire life's journey working towards that ultimate stage of enlightenment. So when you understand these basic 5 regulations and see that they're the core fundamentals of any meditation practice, you can see that it can affect anything you do in life. And it doesn't matter if you're doing a sitting meditation or a Tai Chi or yoga or Qigong. These are all kind of the core fundamental basics that will help you with those practices.
What do you recommend as the starting point? Is there somebody that kind of interested, but a little bit overwhelmed because, one of the great things about, what you've kind of laid out is that there is the mind, body, and spirit kind of all encompassing, right? We talk about the triad at Year One Self, the mind, body, and spirit. Like you said, it does have the martial arts historical foundation, and there's a lot of meditative components to, what you're doing. How do people that are a little bit overwhelmed by, what they're hearing, what do you recommend as a starting point for them to get their feet wet, to get kind of initiated? Is there a certain age? Is there a certain kind of place, point in their life when they're kind of ready to explore? Do they need some kind of training? I know finding a mentor is huge. What about getting started, lighting that fire, kind of also getting their whole foot into the.
Getting started, I would turn them back to those three basic questions that I'll have anybody new consider, and they are finding a why, being consistent, and finding a guide. Because as you mentioned, it can be overwhelming, and you see all these different things out there, and without talking to somebody and having them help point you in the right direction and how to get started, it's extremely difficult and overwhelming. And that's why so many people, there's a million videos out there on YouTube, and there's all these apps that say, listen to this and do that. And it's so easy to get lost in that stuff. And, the internal or the meditative arts is often referred to as the internal arts, and it's called the internal arts for a reason, in that when you're doing your ritual practice, it's not meant to be a time that we're listening to an audio or watching a video. We want to be turning that focus inward and not extending our focus outward. And so having a guide will help us understand that and point us in the direction that's going to be best for us.
Yeah, and I love the way that you broke those down into different pillars. And I would actually tell all of our listeners to go to your content, to go to somebody that has it figured out. And they don't have to spend their life there, but spend a few months actually studying the program and following it, having that consistency, following those three pillars, having a guide, their why, the consistency. Because I do see a lot of people that are wayward in following five different teachers or gurus or schools, or they take one thing and then they do one practice and then they do the next and they do the next, and that might be a good place to start. But ultimately, if you want to see some progress, and grow on this journey and this path, I think that again, just reiterating the fact that, having a guide, having support, having the accountability is really important. And I see it as really exciting, actually, when you say those five different things. Like, I know maybe I'm a little bit more advanced than a beginner, but I'm like, oh my gosh. And then there's this part, and then there's the philosophy part, and then there's the spiritual part. And so I want people to be excited about that and not like, oh my gosh, overwhelmed, right? So I do encourage people to take a deeper look at your work. We could talk for so long. I do ask this question to all my guests, if you would like to answer. What is a book that has helped you on your journey through, aside from your books, and we'll link your books and we'll encourage people to see if they resonate with them. But a book that helped you on your journey that maybe everyone, in your opinion, should read at some point in their life. Could you recommend one?
I really like a book by Robert Greene called Mastery. That was an interesting book. I'm an avid reader, so there's so many books out there that I enjoy. I try to read at least a book a week. In the meditative arena, understanding Qigong, there's some great books out there by Dr. Yang Ming. In the philosophy, if you haven't studied the Tao Te Ching, I think that's a great practice to incorporate as part of my meditation journey. I had memorized the Tao Te Ching and go through those sayings in my mind every day, and it's part of my journey, and I really got a lot of value from that. And I think there's a lot of life lessons to be learned from that book.
That's wonderful. Any particular translation that you like?
There's so many. I recommend experimenting with a few of them and kind of see what resonates with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
I heard somebody once say that there was over 14,000 translations of the Tao Te Ching, which just kind of blew my mind. It was hard to fathom that, but it's the most widely published and distributed book on the planet other than the Bible, which
wow.
is pretty
I
impressive.
didn't,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I hadn't heard that fact, so that's amazing.
Yeah.
Not that we need a cell to read it, but if
Sure.
it helps
Sure.
get people to read it, yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Excellent. Yeah, one thing that I have recently been curious about, and we've been kind of exploring. I did a podcast about this recently. You talked about the fourth stage being energy, right? And and how eventually you can kind of learn to work with the flow of energy. You just got back. We were trying to connect with you from a journey to the other Eastern Hemisphere, and one of the things that we have found anecdotally pop up is there are certain centers around the earth that coming up in the podcast. And I want to know, is there a place that you find you connected with in some way, whether it's the people, whether it's nature? We hear Costa Rica, we hear Colorado, we hear kind of, Peru, Machu Picchu, we hear a lot of places in the Western Hemisphere. We hear there's other places, back east where a lot of it all started that we hear about. So has there been in your travel a place that you really connected with and, felt, changed or more connected with higher energy when you were there?
I've traveled a lot in my life. A couple places that kind of stand out to me energetically that have left a mark on me. One is New Zealand. The other one is Hawaii. And the last one would be Thailand. All of those places seem like something about them just left a mark, so it's and there's so many great places in the world, but I think energetically for a practice, it's just great to be out in nature anywhere where you're as far away from the city as you can be.
That's perfect. And you did set me up for a follow up, so I lied about last question. What you've been doing a lot of traveling, you had said you have traveled in the past quite a bit. What's one non-negotiable that Jeff Patterson has to do every single day? You're pretty prolific. You're a writer. You're practicing the Tai Chi. Doing the meditation. I'm doing a lot of work. Businessman. What's one thing that you have to do no matter where you are? A certain ritual personally that's part of your practice that is really must do no matter what.
I do my morning ritual every day. It's a combination of a number of different things, but I haven't missed a day of that since 5 years ago when I had my hip surgery, and I don't plan on missing another day
Oh, wow.
in the foreseeable future. It's just part of who I am at this point.
That's excellent.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's quite a streak. All right. Where can they find out, more about your morning ritual and more about the things that have made you successful? I know that for a while there was an opportunity to sign up, get a free copy of the book. I don't know if that's still ongoing, but if you can let us know what main socials you use, what's the website people can find out more, and what they can expect when they get there.
Yeah, so if you'd like to get a copy of my recent book, I'm giving away a free copy. Just pay for shipping. You could go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book. Get a copy of that. Also at theyieldingwarrior.com, I have my online program there and my teacher training program up there as well. I have all the basic socials. They're all, if you look for The Yielding Warrior, you'll find all those.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you, Jeff. Again, thank you for the work that you do and continue to be your awesome self. So thanks.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Please be in touch. Great meeting.
Yes, you too.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery.